Afternoon all, I'm with my good friend Paul Georgiou today. Hi Paul.
Hi Trev. Today we're looking at the French, specifically the Tarrasch Variation, invented by Siegbert Tarrasch in the late 19th century.
Yeah.
Possibly played by somebody else previously.
Yeah. And we're both playing in a blitz later. There's a Capes Trophy, before I mentioned that.
Should be very exciting, yes.
So a team blitz later, so there might be some interesting games after that on the channel. But for the moment, we're going to have a look at the Tarrasch today. So French defence Tarrasch. So you've been playing the Tarrasch a large part of your chess career, Paul?
On and off.
On and off. Okay, so after e4, e6, we have the French defence.
We do.
And so d4, d5. By the way, for the YouTube audience searching for French defence, do you think most people will be searching with SE at the end, American spelling?
Quite possibly.
Yes, I've been wondering about titling the video with American spelling. I don't know what you guys on YouTube think about that, rather than CE. But we're used to CE for all the defences here in the UK for French defence, etc., Sicilian defence. But anyway, let's move on. Sorry. So the Tarrasch is with knight d2. Well,
because in the 19th century, they used to play e takes d5, or sometimes e5. But e takes d5 is actually seen as the most dynamic move because it opened up the position. So someone like Blackburn would always take pawns to open up the game because he didn't want stodgy play. And e5 was also played sometimes, but knight c3 and knight d2 didn't really come in until towards the end of the 19th century.
Really, they didn't recognise the symmetrical pawn structure was a bit dull.
Well, no, it's just Blackburn wanted an open game with free play. He didn't want to block things up.
Right.
And players like that. And there was knight c3 pioneered by Steinitz, and knight d2 pioneered by Tarrasch.
Siegbert Tarrasch.
I mean, knight c3 is more aggressive, but the thing about knight d2 is it does actually leave the d pawn slightly weak, whereas knight c3 allows a pin of the knight with bishop b4.
Yeah.
So each move has its advantages and disadvantages.
Yes. Oh, by the way, I should mention we have done a detailed overview of the French defence. We're focusing in today on the Tarrasch in particular. That detailed overview is well worth watching. It's approaching 2 hours. Which will be, I'll put this video as a reply to that one, which we did in March of this year. So knight d2, Tarrasch defence. So he wasn't a great friend of Nimzowitsch, was he? They apparently had bitter feuds with Nimzowitsch.
Well, that was later on, because Nimzowitsch thought that e5 was best, and Tarrasch disagreed on move 3. But of course, Nimzowitsch wasn't around when Tarrasch pioneered this in the late 19th century.
Yeah.
It was some 25, 30 years later that this rivalry came to the fore.
Yes.
So I think maybe we should start with Black's most dynamic aggressive response, which is knight f6.
Isn't that the sort of classical? What is it called then? Knight f6 on its own.
Well, they don't seem to really have names. In knight c3 lines have names, more specific names. The Winawer and the classical. But does it actually have a name? I'm not entirely clear what it's called. If it's called anything. It's interesting. Some lines are given names and some aren't.
Okay.
Some are just named after the move.
Okay.
Right. So, and this is obviously attacking the e pawn. So White has to decide what to do about that. But he's actually only got 2 possible moves here that are any good. Bishop d3 is a sideline,
right?
Which is certainly playable.
Yeah.
But Black should just play c5 now.
So if Black tries to win the pawn here on d4,
that's probably not going to be a good idea. So
yes, it's a trap.
It's
a trap, isn't it?
This is a well-known idea. Queen takes d4, bishop b5, check.
Oh, winning the queen. And it doesn't matter if it's protected as a pin knight, so we can still take the queen free of charge.
You can.
Okay.
So don't fall for that one.
Yes.
But so we played c5. And if white plays e5 now, then we're just going back into lines we're going to look at in a minute. It's just the same thing. So to give it some independent value after c5, white should probably play c3. But here black should be fine after just swapping things off. C takes d4, c takes, d takes e4, knight takes e4, bishop takes, bishop b4 check. This is not going to be a problem.
Okay.
So really bishop d3 doesn't offer white much, which is why white virtually always plays 4e5. Black has two made moves here. Well, knight fd7 is by far the most common, but let's briefly look at knight e4. A slightly dubious idea, which I've played on occasion. And white should probably take. He can play bishop d3 as well. And this is now black should take on d2, bishop takes, and c5 is natural. And I thought that this was perfectly fine for black. After c3, knight c6, knight f3, queen b6 can be a bit of a problem.
Oh yes, there's awkward congestion on d4.
d4 and b2.
Yes.
So white probably shouldn't play it. In fact, what white should actually do after c5 is just take it. And then play will probably continue with knight c6, knight f3, bishop takes c5, and now white probably castle or play queen e2, and white is a little better. But this is certainly not an attempt to refute the line. So going back after knight e4, a more direct attempt to refute this line is to actually just take the knight, and black recaptures. And now if white plays too passively, black can get a good. If white plays c3, then black should play c5, and actually the addition of these two actually benefits black, because after the pawns come off, bishop b4 check is annoying in some lines.
Right.
This tends to be perfectly fine for black.
This pawn's a nuisance for natural development. So how is white going to get developed here?
Well, it is slightly awkward. And similarly, if white plays knight e2 instead of c3, knight e2 here, again c5, which is again fine for black. So white has two main moves instead of knight e2. One is bishop e3, and this can become quite hairy. Black should actually strike back now with c5, and c3 doesn't really make sense, so that should be taken. And then black plays knight d7.
Knight d7.
And all sorts of random complex play can ensue. White, for example, can play moves like queen g4, but he's got to watch out for his king to some extent. The queen's going to go marauding in on g7. So really, this is the sort of line where white probably doing quite well if he knows what he's doing, but if he doesn't, he could actually lose fairly quickly. But I think the most natural, most sensible move is actually, instead of bishop e3, is to play bishop c4.
Oh, so d5 could be met with d5. Sorry, c5, d5 potentially.
No, if black plays c5, then d5 is just good for white.
Yes.
This is quite unpleasant.
Bishop's blocked in. Yes. E4's a bit dislocated.
Well, if black takes now, then it looks like he may well lose a pawn on e4 in a minute.
Yes. Yes, it looks unpleasant. Okay.
So bishop c4 stops c5. a6 is, I think, a good move here, and preparing b5, and white normally stops that with a4, and now b6, just preparing to the bishop to defend the pawn. Now white has to be slightly careful here. I played a recent game where white was quite dismissive and bashed out d5 very quickly.
d5 here.
Yes, and this is a very double-edged, because now black can actually play bishop b7, and white can actually get into all sorts of trouble here. If you take on e6, queen takes d1, king takes d1, f takes e6, bishop takes, and white has actually won a pawn, but now knight c6 is good, and bishop f4, and move to defend a pawn, and now black can play knight d4, and whereas the bishop goes back to, say, b3, then black castles queenside, and this is pretty dangerous for white. There's another rook coming to the f file. So e3 may come in at some stage. White's king is on the run.
Yes, it looks like a powerful gambit.
And this ended in total disaster for white in a recent game.
All right. So you are using knight e4 recently?
Occasionally.
Interesting.
So d5 is premature there.
So e5 will promote that as the main line.
We're still looking at this line.
Sorry, yeah. Knight e4. Yeah. So taking.
Takes. Bishop c4. a6. a4. b6.
So not d5. That's not to be recommended.
No. It's just very risky.
Yes.
So knight e2 is sensible, and bishop b7, and white castles. And I actually find this rather problematic, because white has a rather simple plan of trying to round up that pawn,
yes,
but without actually rushing it.
Yes.
White doesn't go chasing after it immediately, but you can play moves like knight g3, c3. Bishop b3 to c2.
Oh yes, slowly surround the pawn.
And black has to develop counterplay, and it's not so easy.
Yeah.
I'm not all that keen on this line for black.
Yes.
I mean, it has been played by Grandmaster, perhaps Lapushin played it, perhaps.
Right.
I could be wrong, but that pawn on e4 is a bit of a worry.
It's a controversial line, isn't it? You've got double pawns and a slightly weak pawn potentially, but white has to be careful how he rounds it up.
Yeah, I mean it does get in the way of black's pieces, but he has to be careful not to just lose it for nothing.
Yeah.
So that's the knight e4 line looked at briefly. So now we've got knight fd7 is the main move.
Yes.
And white has a few moves. Bishop d3 is the most common, when black can play b6 or c5. So let's look at b6. This has the idea of swapping off the bad bishop. One good thing white is just to acquiesce. Let's just play knight e2,
Yes.
and after bishop a6, just take it and castle. And the knight is slightly misplaced on a6. White is a little ahead in development, and he can think about maybe playing f4 or playing a knight out to the h5 square.
Oh, right.
He can possibly build up with b3 and c4.
I see. Yes.
White is a little better here. His bishop's not particularly bad, and he's more ready to go than black is.
Yes.
So stronger players tend not to actually play this bishop a6 idea.
Ah.
It's seen as slightly slow.
So even if, yes, strategically it looks important, but
I used to play a lot like this when I was a junior. I was very obsessed with swapping off my bad bishop.
Did you have lots of games of Alex in this, like Alex Alfonso?
No, because he always played d4.
All right. Oh yes,
or sometimes c4. But I did have lots of bad bishop play with him, but after d4.
Okay.
And so after b6, another possibility is queen e2. And a line that I had as a junior a few times was c5 here.
Oh, threatening
c4,
winning
yes.
the bishop.
Yes, and after c3,
Yes.
I took on d4. I took on d4. Then after knight c6, knight f3, I played knight b4.
Oh, very nice. And if the bishop moves back now, we've got a very nice move, haven't we?
Bishop a6.
Yes. You must have won a few games in that.
I don't think anybody ever actually did that.
Oh.
It doesn't actually win immediately. It's just very unpleasant.
Yes.
Anyway, so knight f3, so we've got to get to knight b4 again.
Oh, sorry.
And now castles. Knight takes, queen takes, and now I was very much enamoured of the move here, knight b8.
Oh, not a5, just knight b8.
Yeah, a5 is better, but I played knight b8 here on a few occasions, and I was quite pleased with the fact that all my pieces were on the back rank.
You're a bit Nimzovician with
Yes.
all these retreats, aren't you?
While White has castled most of his pieces.
Yeah.
But only later on did I find the problem which nobody ever actually played against me, which is b4.
Oh, dynamic pawn sack.
Well, it's not a pawn sack at all.
Oh, it's not a pawn sack, it's a queen b5 check.
It's queen b5.
Yes. So just shutting out, if bishop a6 now, b5.
Just b5. It just refutes my whole strategy. So
B4.
after b4,
Yes.
White has a rather large advantage.
So maybe a5 is better than after all here.
Yeah, a5 is stronger, definitely.
But it weakens the b5 square a bit, but black's got the bishop on that nice diagonal.
I mean, this is probably fairly playable, I would think.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so let's go back to the main move, which is c5.
c5, yeah.
And now White plays c3, as always, and Black plays knight c6. And now knight gf3 or knight e2, they're both possible. Knight gf3 is a well-known gambit after queen b6. I mean, maybe White can take on c5, but the normal players do just castle, which is a well-known pawn sack. C takes d4, c takes, knight takes, knight takes, queen takes, knight f3, queen b6, and now generally White plays queen a4 here, which clamps down on that knight on d7.
So the queen can come aggressively.
And the queen frequently switches over to g4, possibly even h4.
Yeah.
And bishop e3 could be coming with tempo, possibly another sack.
This central pawn wedge is very dangerous, isn't it, for black's king safety generally?
Yeah, I'm not sure what the verdict on this line is. It's not seen as entirely clear, is it? But also White can be first to the c file. White's quite flexible. White can attack on the queen side or the king side.
Yeah.
Whereas black is undeveloped. So not a line black should go into unless he's well prepared, I would say.
Yeah.
Of course, after knight gf3, black doesn't have to actually. Black can just play bishop e7, which is more solid, and then both sides will probably castle.
I'd consider playing maybe a6 for g5 here. Is that playable?
G5 is
undermining d4.
Yeah, it looks quite interesting. Certainly possible. Yes. Maybe even quite good. Who knows?
Yeah, it's you see g5 and g4 appearing more and more.
Yes, there are all sorts of lines with g4 and g5 being played very early in all sorts of openings.
Basman was right all along for hypermodern.
Well, it's played when there's something to attack. There's either a knight on f3 or f6.
Yes. And the centre is here is a bit insecure.
Yes. So this is another reason why putting the knight on e2 is more common.
All right. Yes. If we go back, so we'll put the knight on e2 here.
And why does put his other knight on f3 sometimes?
But this also means that both knights can be used to protect d4 potentially after f4, knight f3. Both knights are eyeing. If you have this position, you can't really get both knights defending, because it's awkward there because of c4, isn't it? You can't really use that one to defend d4. So maybe that's another argument why.
But the way of looking at it is, if you can have one knight on f3, where would you rather the other knight was, e2 or d2? And e2 is clearly the better square. On d2 it's getting in the way of the bishop as well. And on e2 it can go right to g3 or f4.
Yeah, d2, yeah. And also maybe, f4, f5, knight f4. It's all sorts of things really.
Yeah, f4 is possible, but you have to be careful you don't get your bishop too blocked in. But it's certainly an idea. Okay, so Queen b6 is played here, but it's less effective now because white can just defend with knight f3.
Yeah, so both knights holding the fort here.
And black has on occasion played slightly passively with c takes d4, c takes, bishop b4 check, bishop d2.
Isn't king f1 even possible?
King f1 is possible as well. But after bishop b2, black swaps and plays queen b4. But generally, this is a bit too passive. It just gives white a safe edge.
I think there's a pleasant c-file infiltration of something else.
Yes, I mean,
if you imagine the rook's coming quicker to the c-file.
Black can undermine with f6, of course.
Yeah, right.
And put his king on e7. And it's not so easy to get control of the c-file because there's a knight in the way.
Right.
But this is better for white, really.
Yeah.
It's not bad, but it's a solid line. Solid. Black's probably happy with the draw if he plays like this.
Yeah.
So on move 7, more common is instead of queen b6 is to take the pawn, and white recaptures with the pawn, and black plays black can actually play knight b6 here. This is a sideline which isn't played that much, but it probably gives white a bit too much. White can castle, and after say bishop e7 he can think about f4, possibly going for a quick hack attack. If g6, possibly even g4. It's double-edged, but black could lose fairly quickly. It's certainly possible. So I think black should undermine with f6 here, which is normal. And now white has a double-edged line with knight f4, when black should take on d4.
On d4, not on e5.
Yeah.
D4, yeah. I'll protect e6.
And now queen h5 check. We've looked at this before. And now king e7, knight g6, Black sacks the exchange, h takes. The white takes on f6 first.
Oh, pardon me.
No, knight g6 check.
Oh, pardon me.
Pawn takes, and now we take on f6.
Oh, it's terrible to take on h8 here, I guess.
Well, black just plays knight takes c5.
A huge position, yeah, with those knights. So you have to take on f6.
Well,
yeah.
it's logical to grab a pawn, isn't it?
Yeah.
Really. Queen, knight takes. Queen takes h8. And black plays king f7.
Yeah, making way for the bishop.
Now, if white moves his knight on d2, his queen will disappear from the board very quickly.
Yes, bishop b4 check. Ouch, winning the queen. Check. Double attack, king and queen.
So white generally castles in this position.
Has this been played a lot recently? It looks as though the dynamics favour black, really.
I think may have gone
Exchange.
slightly out of fashion. I think maybe because black was doing quite well.
Yeah, it looks as though black should do well. Yeah.
I mean, he's only got a pawn for the exchange. His king's a bit loose, and his pawn structure's slightly ragged. But after e5, then moves like e4 are coming, and
It's easier to play black.
and what is white going to do now? His queen could even end up in some danger. It's not out of the question.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's why this line is not really that popular, like f4. I guess.
Yes. So normally white takes with the pawn, and a sideline here is to actually take with the queen, which is quite
Right.
interesting. Taking with the knight is more common, but taking with the queen is interesting. Now the pawn is on prise, so knight f3 is normal. Now bishop d6, and white castles. Right. Yeah. Okay. The main problem is black is slightly clogged up now. The bishop on c8 is rather a long way from coming into the game.
Yes.
So black normally castles here, and white will probably play knight c3, and now black can play knight b6. Oh, also I've seen sometimes when the knight relocates to the f8 square.
All right.
Plays rook e8 and knight f8, which seems it's quite slow.
You get zapped here though. You've got to be careful about bishop g5.
Yeah.
If you play rook f7, that loses the queen here, doesn't it?
Yeah. So we don't want to do that. So e8 is better. But it's actually a bit slow. Maybe black plays knight f8 before castling. I don't know, but knight b6 seems quite logical, followed by bishop d7.
Actually, there's another trap here I'm aware from Blitz, that if you go to f7 here and white plays bishop h4,
There's a threat.
yeah, there's a threat. Not here. You can parry with
Now
knight
knight
f8.
f8 is
Otherwise
logical.
But there is a threat potentially of taking a knight g5 check.
Yes.
But yeah, knight f8 is actually tactically defending h7 anyway. Okay.
And then I can come out to g6
Yes.
and maybe even f4.
Yes.
So queen at f6 is a sideline, but knight takes f6 is more common.
Strategically, white's looking forward to making use of that backward pawn on the semi-open file. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the dark square is trying to get rid of this guy to get the outpost.
Let's play a couple more moves. Yeah.
Yeah.
So white plays knight f3 normally here. Black plays bishop d6, and both sides castle. So here, but I mean, it's an interesting position. Black has the open f file,
Yes.
but he has a weak pawn on e6 and a potential weak square on e5, which is currently covered.
Yeah.
White would like to swap off bishop on c1 for the bishop on d6.
Yes.
So often he tries to manoeuvre it round with g5, h4 to g3.
So is bishop f4 immediately probably as bad, is it?
It used to be played, but I haven't seen it recently. I don't know. And black takes and plays knight e4.
Knight e4, yes, hitting the knight immediately.
Yeah, and there are certainly
Wonderful.
sacrificial possibilities like knight e2, rook takes f3.
Oh. So it takes.
And there's danger here, isn't there? Wouldn't you say? I mean, knight g5.
Yes. If we can get a pawn for the exchange, then all these pawns are fractured, aren't they?
Yeah.
D4, F2 and H2 are all fractured. So that'd be a nice exchange tack. Logical one.
I don't know the exact theory, but I know that this is quite dangerous. And
Yeah. So that's why probably people...
take the long route.
Yes. In fact, you mentioned that before. In fact, I heard that of Varonian, you know, when he did well in the recent tournament in the Olympiad.
Yes.
He was always taking his time and, you know, with his pawn sacks, not trying to gain material immediately. And I think that's what's really stumbled a lot of his opponents, that they were expecting more obvious, faster lines, but he was very slow in getting back material and his manoeuvring.
Right. I haven't seen his games, but
Well, a lot of his games are like that. So the long route is bishop g5 to play the zigzag to get rid of the bishops.
well, is it from bishop f4? Is it allows tactical ideas?
Yeah.
I mean, knight c3 is more normally played instead of bishop g5, I think.
Right.
And now bishop d7 is a move, and also queen e8 is another move.
Oh yeah, Watson's book on the French, landmark book on the French. Watson's good, isn't it? If someone really wants a good book on French, that was the classic, wasn't it?
Has it been updated recently? But I don't know. Alekos is certainly very fond of it. I know. Of course, the bishop going to d7 can often work its way around to e8 and h5.
Sorry, not with queen e8.
Not the queen on e8.
So bishop d7 here, yes. This is the classic manoeuvre, isn't it?
Of course, white can play rook e1, which makes it
Difficult, yeah.
difficult.
So white's really wanting to pick here on this e6, isn't it? This backward pawn on the file, but black's got the compensating like dynamic play. And okay, so
I mean, white should be slightly better in these lines. Also, white has an isolated pawn, of course, we should mention.
yes,
And but black may, in some lines, play e5, liberating the centre.
yeah,
I mean, but white's king can actually end up in trouble in these lines because of the open f file.
yes.
And all sorts of strange things like knight g4 and knight takes d4 have been played with the queen landing on h4, hitting f2 and h2 and things of that ilk.
I'm not sure one would want to risk a one-day game in this, because a better prepared opponent might have sort of seen all the brilliant plans just even before the game. And
I wouldn't play this against Simon Williams if I was you.
yeah, it's a lot of very theoretical, isn't it?
It is. I mean, this is just the beginning, and the line's gone for another 10 moves, and some of them end up with white being checkmated, despite the look of his current position. Okay, so we've looked at that. Okay, right. Shall we move on to the next move, which is 5f4 after knight fd7.
So just rewind here. After knight fd7.
Another aggressive possibility the white has is f4 here, trying to construct a big centre, and there are many myriad random hack lines which we can't all go into because it will take days. But c5 is pretty much universally played
one
here.
spectacular loss of Adams against Andy Mack. Andy Mack playing the French defence. Adams took material on e6 and he lost the piece. It was a well-known trap in Watson's book. Yeah, I witnessed that. I was at that tournament.
Was Adams a grandmaster at the time?
No, he was still really, really strong though. 240, 230.
Right, probably an IM. Okay, so c3 is shoring up the pawns. Is knight c6 naturally, and white again places his d knight to f3, and all sorts of fun can ensue here. Sample line is c takes d4, c takes queen b6, and now bishop b4 check is coming into play when the d pawn could be on prise if I put a bishop in the way. Note that black's knight on d7 prevents bishop b5 tricks winning the queen.
Right.
So black is definitely targeting
yes.
that pawn.
Yes.
So white often displays g3 here.
Yes.
With the idea that his king is just going to run away to f2 and g2.
Yeah.
But you know, the fun line here is bishop b4 check, king f2, and black can actually play g5 here, just trying to blast open the position.
I think I should mention, I think I will put a link to the classic French defence book in the description of this video. If not, please remind me to do that, because that is a really landmark book. I just found, the annotations, because the French defence is more strategic in nature than Sicilian. A lot of the explanations of plans are very, very good to understand pawn chains more and stuff.
This line is not all that strategic anyway.
No, this is very tactical.
But white can actually take this, I think.
With the pawn.
And black takes knight takes e5, knight
D
d,
takes
I
E5.
think knight d, and knight takes e5, knight takes e5, king g2, and this can become quite positional actually, and wherever the knight goes, the knight probably drops back to c6, and knight f3, bishop d7. And again, white should be a bit better here. So instead of g5, black can play f6 when white plays king g2, again getting his king off that diagonal.
To be honest, I think I like the character of this much better than the more open Tarrasch lines, because I like this preservation of the e5 pawn.
But often it's not preserved, often it just disappears. But if you're going to play this line, you really have to sort of know what you're doing. Even against weaker players, if they know what they're doing and you don't, you could be in trouble. For example, now castles, knight h3, and now f takes e5, f takes e5, and 109 is a rook takes f3.
Sharp, yeah.
After which black hopes to remove those two pawns in the centre and free his bishop and
so just take d4.
Yeah, just take on d4. Whereas the queen, I think the queen can go to h5 now, which defends the pawn, and also there's possibilities of queen e8. What's black to do here? It's all very very murky. I think g6 is possible. I believe hitting the queen, maybe perhaps not. But it's quite random, and I don't know it. And if I knew it, then I'd play it. But you have to actually know what you're doing to play lines like this.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's a brief overview of knight f6 lines. So now we can move on to black's alternative, black's main alternative on move 3 instead of knight f6, which is c5, which is actually more in the spirit of Tarrasch himself. He would probably play c5 against his own line. He normally played c5 in these type of positions, freeing up the centre.
Tarrasch versus Tarrasch.
Yes, exactly. Right. White's main move is e takes d5, but let's look briefly at knight f3 first. Knight f3, black can actually just take on d4. When e takes d5 will transpose to, and I'm going to look at it in a minute. But if white doesn't take on e5, not after knight takes d4, it's the alternative. And now knight c6, it's generally thought not to be a problem at all for black. So white normally plays e takes d5.
Oops.
With the pawn, the knight on g1. Black can actually take with with either piece here, the pawn or the queen. Even c takes d4 has been played as well, but it's not very good, is it? Because this white did not play
bishop b5.
Bishop b5 can cause
interruption, because then
cause problems.
Actually, isn't there a tactic here?
There's a tactic here with takes and queen h5.
Oh, the queen h5 immediately or after ef7? Immediately.
Quite possibly both.
Well, the thing is, after ef, you don't have to play king take. You can play.
Yeah, but the knight's on priest on g8.
Oh, pardon me. Yeah. So we're looking at this queen h5.
So whether this is obviously not very good, is it?
Yeah, to take this guy, and this is not good.
Black's the pawn down with a horrible position.
Yeah.
So this is not to be recommended. So black normally takes with. Okay, you want to look at the queen first. A ready play move is d takes c5, which I think is slightly underrated. The idea after bishop takes c5, knight f3. We're going to try and basically gain tempi on both the queen and the bishop. I mean, black looks quite active, but we can hit the queen with bishop c4, and we can hit the bishop with either knight e4 or knight b3 soon.
The problem is black's structurally very solid, so even if you gain a few tempi, they might not mean that much.
Yeah, but this is a good line for avoiding the main lines of theory, and white can maybe castle queenside as well.
Right.
It's possible. But so anyway, the main move is knight going back after queen takes d5 is to play knight gf3.
A temporary pawn sack.
A temporary pawn sack, and black generally takes the pawn, and white plays bishop c4, hitting the queen, which drops back to d6. Now, what you don't play knight b3 here. This has been seen a few times. Knight b3.
Ooh.
It doesn't actually lose a piece, but it's
awkward.
Queen b4 check is rather annoying.
Yes.
You
So
can
you lose a sense pawn though. You do lose a sense pawn. You have to go back knight c6 now. And it's
I'm not entirely clear if you're actually going to get your pawn back or not now.
Yeah.
You have to remember to actually castle first.
Yes.
And black plays knight f6 here to stop the rather annoying knight e4. And now knight b3, knight c6.
Of course, if black tries to play e5, I think you just take it. Oh no, you don't just take it.
There's
Rook e1.
Sorry.
What would be a good move here? Rook e1.
Well, I think there's lots of. I think rook e1.
Yeah.
Knight takes e5 may well be good as well. Knight g5.
It's horrible for black. Yeah, you don't want to do that as black. You want to keep that pawn on e6. So you play knight c6.
Yeah, it's around wise to try and retain this pawn. And now generally you take with the b knight, I believe. After knight takes, you can take with the queen, and you think, well,
that's the boring line, or
white's got queenside majority, but generally white hasn't got very far with queen takes d4 at all. So knight takes d4 is the main move, and black has various options here. Bishop d7 is certainly a move, but I think a6 is generally seen as being the safe option, stopping things landing on b5.
yeah.
And now quite a well-known line is it's rook e1, queen back to c7, hitting the bishop b3, bishop d6, hitting h2. Now white plays the tactical knight f5.
Oh, sorry, not h3. I think I've seen Adams play h3 in some games. That's white.
It's a bit slow. I think knight f5 is the main line.
It's the main line, right?
I think so. Now bishop takes h2 check, king h1, and black castles. And now white can play spectacular knight takes g7. You seen this?
This can't be the main line though if it wins for white.
Well, it doesn't win for white. It's not entirely clear. It was after king takes. But white plays queen f3.
Ah. So he's introducing some subtle tactics like bishop h6.
Bishop h6, and also g3 is possible.
To lock in the bishop, right?
And after bishop takes g3, white can play rook g1, and suddenly the rook's in the attack as
Oh,
well.
right, yes, g3, rook g.
So this is another sharp theoretical.
So what
line.
does black do here? Is this what does black do here?
What does black do here? I'm trying to remember. What happens after bishop e5? Something happens after.
Has black already made a mistake taking on h2 maybe?
Something happens after bishop e5. I'm just trying to remember what it is. Oh, no, now does white play queen e3, forking e5 and h6.
Oh, I see. Yes.
I'm not sure, but it's all quite dangerous for black. Basically, if black loses back the piece, he's going to be worse.
Actually, but there's knight g4 here, isn't there?
There's queen g5.
King. Oh, I see. You can take them g4.
We can just take it.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So this is unpleasant. Yeah. This is an unpleasant pawn set.
Well, I mean, it's quite heavy theory, and I know Simon Knott plays it.
Still the same. The main move today is knight f5, then not h3. I always thought I was playing h3. I think in my games,
as far as
just to defend the h pawn. I wasn't aware of this.
Well,
Oh dear.
Well, you have to actually know knight h5.
Right, knight f5.
Knight f5, yes. I mean, h3 is safe, but probably doesn't give white very much.
Let's have a look at this again. So in this position, I don't want to turn on the dreaded engine.
No, turn on the engine, see what it says.
I thought you were against engines. Okay, apologies to everyone. We're going to turn on the engine. We're going to obscure the boards, make the boards.
Because it's a highly tactical line.
The engine says, computer says no. Computer says rook d8.
Rook d8.
Okay, rook d8 with an advantage to black. No, but this is only a brief analysis. If takes, that's much better for black. Hang on, the move here apparently is queen d4.
Queen d4. So you see, I was wrong. Queen d4.
Yes, because tactically we don't really know the answers, do we, in these positions? What's precise? So what is going on here? If bishop d6, say, check.
Yeah, bishop h6 check is.
And now this is like absolute murder, of course. If we bring the king out of space in 5,
we're not doing this.
g4 check, and there's like mate in 5. Okay, so on bishop h6, it's murder any case. If here,
we just take the knight
here, and that's winning. Black's pretty desperate there. So queen d4 is the move. So why is that a lot stronger than queen f3 that we mentioned intuitively?
Well, it controls the e5 square.
All right, so bishop e5, because you mentioned queen e3.
Yeah, it's not good enough, is it?
So knight d7 here.
Yeah.
What was the other move? Knight g4 would fell to
Well,
queen
loses
g5.
the piece back.
Yeah, and white is better there. But no, so forget what we mentioned about queen f3, guys. Queen d4, it's good to engine check sometimes in tactical positions. Okay, so queen d4 gives white an advantage in this line, so you need to know this. Queen d4.
Yeah, I remember the bishop e5 idea,
Looks
but
like the
white
incisive
has to
move.
actually stop it.
Yeah.
So queen d4
So
is...
this knight f5 here, is this liked by the engine? Knight f5 is a solution here?
Well, it's very tactically complex. I mean, you can't work it out by putting in Houdini for 5 seconds.
If h3 is black's doing okay after h3, it seems.
Yeah.
Okay, let's turn that off.
That's probably the last appearance of Houdini, hopefully today.
Yes. I think it has killed the computer now. Oh dear. Stop. Oh no, I hope we haven't wrecked our video up to this point. Oh no.
I'm sure you can get rid of it. Can you just pull the screen down so that it effectively disappears? You pull the board down.
One sec, sorry, it's not letting me stop now. Oh dear. That was a costly mistake. Okay, I hope the recording is not messed up after that. Anyway, apologies guys. We just needed to check that out tactically. So knight f5 is some sharp lines.
And h3 is a bit slow and doesn't give white very much.
Right. Okay. So.
Going back to the position where we're after bishop c4, queen d6. White also has 7 queen e2. Going back a few more moves. Going back, carry on going. Yeah, bishop c4, queen d6. White has also played queen e2 in this position, which is a relatively recent idea. I do remember there was a very crushing game in the 4NCN, I think, where Mark Ferguson beat John Levitt in about 20 moves.
All right, queen e2. Yeah.
Queen e2, yes. And the idea, the basic idea of this is that White hopes to regain the pawn and he'll hope to castle queenside. So say knight f6, knight b3, knight c6, bishop g5. The only slight problem with this line is you take longer to recapture the pawn, so black may try and retain it. I think queen b4 check is normal here. Bishop drops back to d2, queen b6, and white castles.
Queenside.
Yes. And now White plays bishop out somewhere and try and regain the pawn.
Yes.
I mean, Black can throw bishop c5 possibly.
That looks like a very dynamic way of playing, rather than this immediate recapture. Yes.
It is, but it's slightly more risky. But it's certainly worth looking at.
Yeah.
But Black has more chances of retaining the pawn, though it certainly looks a bit risky. For example, the bishop comes to c5,
Right.
but then if White gets the bishop and then gets the pawn on d4, he's going to be clearly better. So it's less theoretical than the main lines, but it's an alternative.
Interesting to be aware of that, queen e2. A more longer term pawn sack to try and castle queenside. Very interesting.
Okay, so going back to position after c5, e takes d5. Tarrasch would probably play pawn takes e takes d5 here, and have no fear of the isolated pawn, because he was very fond of isolated pawns. Freedom for all the pieces. And there are a lot of different move orders here, but knight f3 is normally played, and knight c6, and bishop b5 is usual, and Black plays bishop d6, losing tempo, and White takes on c5, Black takes, White castles, and Black generally plays knight e7, so that to avoid a pin with the bishop on g5 later, and knight b3. I think the bishop can actually go either way now. Bishop b6 is maybe slightly more aggressive, hitting at f2, but that's quite often played with the knight's on f6, because then Black can play knight e4 sometimes, or the bishop can go back to d6 as well. I think it's a matter of choice. And this line is sometimes played by grandmasters who want to draw with Black. I think, well, I have an isolated pawn, but I'm solid and I shouldn't lose.
This bishop's got freedom anyway. It's not blocked in by horrendously.
All Black's pieces are free. I mean, really, the only disadvantage is the weak pawn, and White can often swap pieces off and try and go into a superior ending.
I have had some horrific French defence games with trapped-in bishops.
So there's no trapped-in bishop. Your bishop's free to come out to g4 or wherever you like.
You pay the price in a different way structurally.
Yeah, it's a different type of game. You know, Black has a weak pawn, which is quite a permanent sort of weakness, but he has freedom for all his pieces. So that's a brief look at that line. Okay, right, shall we move on to other lines now? Black on move 3. After knight d2, Black has quite a few other options which have been tried. Knight c6 is the Guimard.
Yes, I think this can be very, very annoying, because pressure can be further exerted on d4. It's a bit of a vulnerability, d4.
Yeah, which is, I'm not seeing as being entirely correct. Obviously it blocks the c pawn, which is Black normally challenges the sender with c5 in the French. But it creates quick pressure on white's centre.
Yeah.
And black may play something like e5 or undermine with f6 if white plays e5.
Well, white can't play e5 here because of knight d4.
No, but generally.
Now the thing that annoys me in blitz, I just don't know what to do to e5.
Well, after c3, then
e5.
E5 is
that the main
played. Well, white normally plays 4 knight f3, but this is a line. Let's look at this while we're here.
This is not good for white, is it? Is it?
It's a line, and white generally takes on d5, and black takes with the queen.
Black's ahead in development.
Well, knight f3, but we're going to gain a tempo on the queen in a second. And now e takes d4. White plays bishop c4, and the queen normally goes to f5, I believe. When white can take on d4 with the knight.
With the knight?
Yeah. Knight takes d4, c takes, bishop e6.
Black can try and castle queenside, maybe.
Quite possibly. I mean, it's an interesting position.
Black seems to have more of the dynamics than white, more dynamic pressure.
Quite possibly, but white has his share of the game here, I think. There are certainly ideas.
But do you think knight f3 is stronger then to stop this e5 business?
Well, it's certainly more common. I mean, white generally plays knight f3, because certainly c3, e5, knight c6 is then justified, even though black's lost the tempo. He's
you want to keep a lock and key on the c5.
He liberates all his pieces, and now knight f6 is the normal move, and after e5, black drops the knight back to d7. Black's getting ready to undermine with f6.
Yes, there's a different, instead of undermining the base of the chain, you're undermining the head of the chain. So rule breaking strategy, more dynamic on the f file, changing strategy.
Yeah. So knight b3 is played here quite a lot, shoring up the d4 pawn, and maybe the c5 square later. And a common move here is a5.
I think Mackel used to play this in blitz a lot, the knight c6 French, with great effect.
Dominic Mackel?
Yeah.
He did? Okay. Dominic Mackel, I haven't seen him for a long time.
I think they played in the British Championship.
He's moved to Devon or Cornwall or somewhere, anyway. So, and white generally plays a4 to stop, and now b6 is played. And now, one example of a line, bishop g5, bishop e7, a move you would probably like, h4. Well, already we have quite a complex, unbalanced position with chances for both sides. Okay, right. Going back after so knight c6, knight f3, knight f6, e5, knight fd7. Another symptom. Of course, if white plays bishop d3 here, then black plays knight b4, and suddenly goes back to c5. So after bishop e2,
c5 now.
It's now c5.
And you give the knight c6.
And c3, the knight drops back to c6.
Yeah, lovely jubbly.
No problems. Okay, so white generally puts bishop on e2. And now black can play f6, and that's pawns on pre, so we better take on, and queen takes is, and again d4 is on breeze and e5 is in the air, so knight f1.
Knight f1.
Knight f1 is played in this position.
To put pressure on d5 here with knight e3.
We're trying to discourage e5.
Yes.
Because if e5, well, I can probably take on d5. I'm not sure of the theory, but I imagine there's also bishop g5 is also hanging in the air.
Right.
So black plays bishop d6, and white puts the knight on e3, and both players castle. I mean, a lot will hinge here actually on whether white can successfully stop black playing e5. I mean, if black doesn't manage to play e5, then he's going to end up rather cramped with a rather unpleasant position. I mean, a possible idea white is c4 as well. That's certainly a move that is possible. Okay, so going back to alternatives to bishop e2 and knight b3. Another possible move is c4, which leads to a different kind of game. Black will probably take, and if you take the bishop, then knight b6 is possible, and that's on prise again. So maybe knight takes is better, and now knight b6. And black should be fine here because of the d5 square, I think. Even though white has free play for all his pieces.
Yeah.
Okay, one more possibility is going back is bishop b5 instead of c4. Kind of double pin on the knights. And black has actually played in this position slightly odd looking a5, and after castles,
yes,
knight a7,
yes,
getting the bishop away,
yes,
and after it drops back, we can come in with c5 again,
yes,
and the queen side can get going quite quickly. Yes, that's the Guimard variation.
Yeah.
Brief review of
Guimard. So was he wasn't one of the greatest players?
Well,
he was a player, wasn't he?
Yeah, Carlos Guimard was an Argentinian player, I think.
Grandmaster?
Yes, I think he was a grandmaster. Yes, he was.
He had a lot of games in this to look at.
He was around for a long time. He was around in the 30s, 40s, but he played as a veteran, I think, into the 1990s. He played some of those veterans tournaments, so he had a lengthy career, playing until his 80s.
Great.
And certainly he would be a GM by modern standards if he wasn't. I think he was. Yeah, I think he's a bit younger than, say, Najdorf, contemporary of those kind of players. Okay. Right, so that's the Guimard done. Okay, so right, there's also d takes c4, but I think we should actually look at this when we look at the knight c3 lines, because we can look at them all together.
Yes,
it's kind of logical to put all the Byrne and Rubinstein lines into one basket. So hopefully there'll be a future video where we'll look at d takes c4 against knight c3, which is obviously the same as against knight d2. And
that's great for the black player to save preparation. Then d takes e4 has got an advantage.
Yeah, it does have the advantage that you can play it against both moves.
Yes.
Of course, white might play 3e5 or e takes d5, but certainly does reduce black's preparation. You've only got to learn a line, one line against two moves.
Yes.
In fact, white's two main moves, has to be said. Okay, another interesting line is the Romanishin, which is temporising bishop e7.
Oh yes, which I had a disastrous season last season with bishop e7. I had a much greater one before that. I think people get used to bishop e7 as waiting movement.
Well, it's been around for some time now. Romanishin, I mean, it ended just 20, 30 years ago. And it's almost a waiting move to see what white does.
Yeah. Well, there's a number of waiting moves here, isn't there? In Watson's book, there's h6, a6.
I'm going on to look at these a bit later. These slightly dubious moves. I think certainly the most natural move is knight f3.
But I think Nigel Short beat Adams with h6 recently in the London Classic.
Did he?
Yeah, I think he played h6 against Adams and won.
Okay, well, I'm going to suggest something against that anyway. So, knight f6 is the normal move. c5 is not very good because it just leads to a poor variation of what we looked at earlier. And now basically the idea is if white plays the natural e5, which he normally does, then white's now because black's bishop e7 move, white's now put his knights on d2 and f3 instead of e2 and d2. So he can't have the e2 f3 knights.
Right.
So knight e4 is possible here, and I'm not entirely sure why it's not played that more often, because it's fairly logical. If white takes it, then his knight's going to have to go up to g1, so that's not very logical. So bishop d3 is played, knight takes d2, bishop takes d2, c5. Maybe it's that white can just take on c5, and it's similar to the line we looked at. Black's wasted a tempo by playing bishop to e7 first. That may be the reason why.
Yeah, it looks as though white's doing well here.
Well, it's like the line we looked at before, isn't it? With knight e4, except that black's taken 2 moves to get the bishop to c5. Therefore, it's a tempo down, I believe. So black normally plays his knight back to d7 instead of e4. And now bishop d3 is normal enough. c5 it's possible. b6 is again possible with similar lines that we looked at before. So c3, knight c6, castles, and black played queen b6.
I think g5 is very tempting here as well.
Yeah, we're back here again with the g5 possibility, and now the centre's being undermined, so white should probably take on c5, and knight takes c5 looks logical. Bishop back to c2, and well, it's a game, isn't it? a5 looks logical, stopping b4. And now what does I play? Rook e1, knight b3.
Yeah.
Who knows? All both logical moves. Knight f1, reroute the knight round to g3, maybe h5. Say it's a game that may play f6 at some point. Okay, so going back after e5, knight fd7, knight e6, castles. Now the knight's blocking the f pawn, black can also play rather simply with c takes d4, and now shuffle his pieces over to the queen side with knight b6, and rook e1 is logical. Bishop d7, knight f1, and now black can play knight b4, bishop b1, bishop b5, and black seems to be developing his share of the game here, though obviously it's not clear that white should still be a bit better. But black can come down the c file if white's not careful. Okay, so going back to carry on going back. An alternative for white on move 5 is to play bishop d3. I briefly mentioned that. When black normally plays c5 and white takes on c5.
Pardon me.
And now everything comes off. D takes e4, knight takes, bishop takes, queen takes, king takes, bishop takes c5, king e2. And this is being played by players who want to grind down their opponents with their queenside majority.
The 3-2 queenside majority.
I think it's been played by people like Hort, I think, and Anderson, maybe people of that generation. But it's kind of gone out of fashion these days. Black may be able to start pushing his pawns in the centre, and the king could end up getting in the way. So that's an alternative line. Okay, so going back to knight e2, bishop e7. Well,
So
yeah, right. Okay, so another possibility that white has is instead of knight f3, is e5.
e5 immediately.
Yeah, which looks kind of logical because now bishop on e7 is getting in the way of the knight. It can't go to f6. The black seems to be okay with immediate queenside play with c5, c3, knight c6, knight df3, c takes d4, c takes, and now slightly surprising bishop b4 check, and after bishop d2, queen b6. Black has generally done alright in this position because he just gets quickly to the c5. Pieces just come out. So after a3, for example, getting rid of this annoying bishop takes, queen takes, knight a5. It's rather annoying.
Yes, coming in.
And now maybe say rook d1 to avoid losing exchange, knight e7, bishop d3, bishop d7, knight e2, rook c8. You can see black is fine here.
Yeah.
He may play the bishop out to b5. He may play knight to c4, bishop a4.
Yeah.
Black has quite quick play, and this may be the reason why e5 is not so popular.
Right, it's immediate e5. Yeah. Interesting.
Okay, another possible move, bishop d3, which holds back the f pawn. So it had knight f6, e5, knight fd7, f4, c5, where we can transfer into something similar to lines we looked at earlier. After c3, knight c6, knight df3, and well, black can play c takes d4 or queen b6, try and undermine f6 at some stage, or even g5. It's just another way of playing it. Okay. Okay, so now let's look at some of the less common moves.
Yes, and I'm fascinated by all the waiting moves available to play here, because they avoid all those of fairy, don't they? That's the advantage.
A6 is possible.
I think Aronian made a joke about h6, saying he doesn't play the French anyway, I think, and he made this joke at the London Classic because the commentary day, I was there watching his commentary, and he just found these quite amusing. It's the pressure's on white, he said, after h6, because he has to win after h6.
This is such a ridiculous looking move, and let's be honest, it can't be any good. A6 is different to h6. A6 is normally played with a particular idea in mind, which is after knight gf3 to play c5, and after e takes d5, reach this line where white can't play bishop b5 check.
Yeah.
So it's actually a more aggressive version of the line, where black is trying to keep pieces on, trying to stop white swapping bits off at the cost of the tempo.
So this is the move caution I should have used against Karpov, maybe a6. I'm just joking. They had an encounter, didn't they, with c5?
But I think caution was trying to play solidly and draw with black, I think, when he played this line. I don't think he was playing for the win.
Right.
And after, say, I don't know, bishop e2, knight c6. In these type of positions, after white's taken on c5, whenever white takes on c4, bishop takes, knight b3. Bishop can drop back to a7 at times.
Yeah. So a6 is not that bad, really, so far.
It's not entirely convincing. It's a little slow, but I don't think White has actually refuted it.
I think a lot. I've been looking at some old master games we've seen. I noticed a3 being played a lot in many openings as well. They're sometimes very useful little moves, a3 and a6.
Well, sometimes they are, and sometimes they're not.
Depends on the position, really. Yeah. So a6. So what would be a critical test? There isn't one.
I mean, in order to not have just waste a move, Black is going to play c5 here, with the idea of reaching these positions, but preventing Bishop b5 check.
Yes.
So it's more of a winning attempt than the immediate c5, I would say.
Right.
It's certainly if Black's planning to recapture with the pawn.
Yeah.
If Black's going to recapture with the queen, then a6 is a bit of a waste of time. I mean, it's not entirely useless, but it's not really a move you'd want to waste your time playing.
All right.
Okay, so now we briefly look at your move H.
I'm pretty sure Nigel Short used this to beat Adams. Adams has got a fantastic performance rating with the Tarrasch defence as White, hasn't he? If you look at his Tarrasch games with White, statistically,
he's pretty good with
like
Tarrasch.
2800, I think. And he lost to Short, H6.
Well, I mean, it's just not a very good move. I mean, just look at it. It can't be a good move, can it?
There's no proof.
I mean, I mean, how do you prove that e4 f6 is a bad move?
To be honest, I used it in London Classic myself after seeing that, and I managed to win, but I had a difficult position. I think the opponent played.
But you were playing a weaker player, though, weren't
you?
Which does always help. But I think White in these lines should avoid playing the move e5. He put the knight on f3.
Yeah.
And if the pawn's not on e5, then g5 is going to be pretty useless. Because playing g5 and g4, waiting 2 moves, and then White just plays knight e5, it's not really going to be very good.
Oh, I see. You want to keep this square potentially for the knight to spring in on g5, g4.
I just think keeping a fluid centre is just logical.
Fluid centre, yeah.
So my idea against this is, maybe this is new theory. Surely it's not. It's just to play a line where you basically hold the centre. Black now plays knight f6.
You just play bishop.
You just play bishop d3. If Black plays c5,
c3.
He plays c3.
Hold the centre.
And now knight c6, just castle. And now say Black does some swaps. Say c takes d4, c takes, d takes, knight takes.
Yeah.
Knight takes, bishop takes.
This doesn't look relevant now, does it?
Well, it's not. It's relevant. I think what we have is an isolated queen's pawn position. Fairly sort of typical. Where the pawn is actually misplaced on h6.
The light squares are potentially fatal now.
It's not irrelevant. It's actually worse. Black would want to actually move it back.
Yeah.
I think White's general idea in these lines, what often lines up is queen and bishop on the long diagonal. If Black's castled queenside, which looks very likely, castled kingside, which presumably he's not going to be able to castle queenside. Then if we line up the queen and bishop.
Yeah, there's no defensive knight here as well. I think Black was silly though to get rid of the defensive knight in this case.
But it could have been got rid of anyway. But Black normally defends against the queen and bishop lined up on a diagonal by playing g6. The problem with g6 is with the bishop it's obviously going to be on e7. h6 is going to be on bridge. So we're actually playing by playing like this, we actually move into a line where h6 is actually not just a waste of time, but actually makes Black's position worse. I think that's quite an interesting, theoretically interesting idea. Of course, White can play this holding line with just going back to position after a move 3. Say knight d2, knight f6 instead of h6. No, Black plays knight f6. bishop d3. White can play the holding line anyway, and now black plays c5.
We've covered this earlier. Yeah.
No, we didn't.
We looked at e5 earlier,
Yeah.
but we've got a line with c3 here from earlier recorded.
Okay, but after knight c6, white can play knight f3. But c5, go back. Yeah, c5, c3, knight c6.
All right, we didn't look at that earlier. Yeah.
And knight f3. Okay, no, white can play this way against either knight f6 or c5. Generally, if white holds the centre, black will play one and then the other. So, and I think Plaskett beat short with this some time ago,
Right.
maybe 15 years ago, and so it just makes logical sense. If this line is playable here, if black plays h6 instead of knight f6, it's obviously going to be an improvement. So we're improving on known line. I mean, it can also be play against a6 as well. So as black has played this rather waste of time with h6,
Yeah.
then I think the holding the centre line
It's better. Yeah, it's more effective.
becomes more effective.
It's more effective. Yeah.
I mean, I've played it against knight f6 and c5, but I certainly be more encouraged to play it against h6. Okay, so, that's interesting line. So let's now look at some even rarer moves. b6 is another not very good move. And again, white should avoid playing e5. So for example, just direct the knight to f3. And now bishop b7, bishop d3. I mean, it's probably vaguely playable, but I'm doubtful. Bishop a6 instead of bishop b7 is definitely not to be recommended. White can, I think, just take that. Knight takes and plays c4.
Oh, he's threatening queen a4.
With
check.
queen a4 threatened, and
Yeah.
black seems to be in a bit of a mess,
Right.
to be honest.
Yeah.
So b6 is not very good. I think it has been. Maybe Tartakower played it, possibly.
Right.
Right. Another not very good move is f5. When white should take that.
Take it on f.
Yes. And now.
To hem in the bishop.
Yeah. And now a good move is knight d to f3. Taking control of the e5 square, so the knight doesn't get there. Now bishop d3, knight e2, and occupying f4 and e5 squares.
Yes,
can,
dominate these two
come,
to make sure the bishop's hemmed in.
yeah, or possibly white can also possibly play an early c4, try and exploit the loosening of that.
Plan B.
Possibly not as early as this, but
No.
knight f3, knight f6, c4, possibly. I don't know. It's an idea, isn't it?
Maybe just later. Oh, okay. Yeah. Maybe even g3 looks possible. G3?
G3 certainly does look possible.
Because you want to kind of restrain. You can put your bishop here and knight h3. It looks like a Dutch kind of defence position.
Yeah, it's a bit slow. I mean, Black's not going to be playing f4 anytime soon anyway. But I mean, it's certainly another way of playing. But f5 is rather dubious and
Yeah.
and rarely played.
Yeah.
Okay, another move we'll look at is g6. I think this is another one of your specials, isn't it?
No, I haven't played this.
Did you not play this at one time?
No, I don't think so.
Oh, this was one of my more, and okay, this is just not a very good move. Just weakens the dark squares. I mean, white can play e5, and just black's weakened his pawn structure.
Yeah.
I mean, his bishop's kind of committed now to going out to g7, where it's going to white can play f4.
Just yeah.
And it's going to bite
Granite,
on granite. Yes.
Experience.
So this is not really very good either. So let's dismiss g6. This is not the spirit of the French, but just attack with c5. Okay, knight e7 is another rather poor move, which or just basically ignore and play knight out to f3. I thought white shouldn't play e5 because that allows black to put the knight on a sensible square,
Yes.
i.e. f5.
Yes.
Even if not immediately, but certainly at some point. Just knight f3, and you think, well, what does black do now exactly?
Yeah.
I mean, after c5, I'm going to consider taking it and possibly keeping it. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's certainly possible. And the knight goes to g6. Well, what's the knight doing on g6?
Yeah.
It's not very good. It doesn't belong there.
Yeah.
You're not pressurising the centre. So after knight g6, for example, you're not pressurising white's centre. Maybe white can just play g3.
What move should we give white?
Black plays knight g.
Okay,
knight g6. It's black's move.
Oh, sorry. Pardon me.
And now g3 seems logical, stopping the knight going to f4, preparing to pressurise the centre.
Fianchetto.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah.
Maybe you play h4 and h5,
Yeah.
kick the knight away.
Yeah.
So that's another poor move.
Yeah.
Okay, another possibility is knight d7. This can lead into Rubinstein variations. This is often a preliminary to lines we're going to look at on a later video. After, say, white plays knight f3, black takes and plays knight f6.
Oh, yes.
Which leads us to a line we're not looking at now.
Yeah.
The only other possibility after knight e7 that's is after knight e7 white can play e5. But this would generally lead us back to lines we've looked at after c5, c3, and now knight e7 to c6.
Oh, right, yes.
And we're actually going to reach a position with the knights, exactly the same position, but with the knights interchanged. Yes, the knights are actually different.
Right.
They're still taking they're still taking 3 moves.
Oh, right, the original start point of the knight's different.
They're still taking 3 moves to get to the same squares, but the other way around. It's kind of slightly odd. Okay, so I think that concludes our survey of the Tarrasch French. Any other lines you'd like to?
No, I think this is good for people to study, and I hope it was beneficial to you guys on YouTube.
Of course, it's only an overview. Unlike those lines of the knight takes g7, you have to actually learn them with either colour before playing them.
Yeah.
But this gives a general flavour of the opening.
Yeah, I think the French defence must be one of the best openings to learn to pick up strategic ideas in chess compared to, say, Sicilian.
Well, it often leads to closed positions, whereas the Sicilian often leads to open positions when white plays d4 on move 3.
Yeah. So I think the ideas are more easily understood from books.
Well, it's quite strategically rich. I mean, you've got ideas like swapping off your bad bishop, challenging the centre with f6 and c5, etc.
Okay. Okay. Thanks, Paul. Okay. Thanks, everyone. Okay. Comments or questions on YouTube. Thanks very much.